This episode is about the Valyrian Steel front fenders and the outboard fender support. In the initial build of this car, of course, there's always some little things that you should have done a little differently. And in this case, it wasn't necessarily something different that we needed to do. It was that the passenger sat low to the ground, and the tires on this car had four-wheel drive tires with big old traction blocks, and they kicked up a lot of dust. And so if the wind was wrong, then the passengers would be breathing in all this dust. And we resolved that the way to deal with that issue was to make some fenders for it. And it wasn't going to be a super simple fix because we wanted to retain the open wheel character of the front suspension, where you can see the entire suspension and you can see everything moving around and whatnot. But at the same time, we wanted to contain the dust. So basically, we had to make some fenders that would cover the wheels and ride up and down. So what we came up with was this design where we attached the inside to some spindles, and then that goes up to the inner fender support, which then went to the overlapping scales that we had there, and they're supposed to be referencing some dragon scales that goes along with the theme of the rest of the car. Before getting to the outboard support, part of the outboard support would need to spin with the wheel, right? And then you'd have a bearing, and then that way it would support the weight. So the solution that we came up with was kind of budget. There's a better way to do it, but the way that we did it does work. We made these lug nuts and chamfered both ends so that they would fit really nicely into the taper in the wheel. And then on the bearing support, which the lug nuts bolted into on the outside, those also had chamfered female ends, and so that located the bearing carrier on the outside and made it so that it was concentric with the wheel. And that way, both of them will spin quite nicely. If the bearing support was off a little bit, then the thing would wobble, right? Over time, that would cause the fender support to break. But luckily, we got it concentric, and the bearing support then holds the bearing, and then a shaft goes through the middle of the bearing, and the shaft is supported by the outer fender support. So the fender ends up being supported on the inside by the spindle, then you have the scales, then you have the outer support, which goes to the bearing carrier, the lug nuts, and the wheels. So that whole thing spins, and it actually ended up working. And I'm positive that I can't have been the first person to do this. Surely there's been a lot of this done before, but I've just never seen it. And if you can think of a place where you've seen somebody make an outboard fender support like this, please let me know in the comments, because I'm curious. I'd like to see how another fabricator would have accomplished this. Unfortunately, on this CAD drawing, the tire looked pretty budget because I was lazy and I didn't spend a bunch of time modeling the tire. Normally, I would model the tire so that everything looked as close as possible to what it appears like in real life. So to sum up, lug nuts, bearing carrier, bearing, shaft, outer fender support. So the first year we had the fenders on there, they sort of worked, but they didn't completely work because dust still crept out from the sides. In order to mitigate that, we made these leather wheel covers that would fill in the negative spaces between the tubes of both the inner fender support and the outer fender support. And we covered it up, probably I'd say 2/3 of it, and it was the back 2/3 of the wheel. And when the wheel rotates, you know, it picks up the dust and brings it up. And we have it all contained in there, and that ended up working like a charm. It wouldn't come out the front. It just all stays in there, and if any gets out, it just goes up, down the bottom, and the car will still kick up dust, but doesn't rise up to the level where the occupants of the car end up breathing it. So it ended up being quite a satisfactory solution to that dust problem. On some of the subsequent cars, we're going to go more futuristic, so I'm very much looking forward to that. I would say that concludes my rant about, or my ramble about this topic. As always, no animals were harmed in the making of this video, although some humans surely received permanent brain damage. Till next time, remember the #1 rule: do not chang it up. I thank you in advance for your cooperation.